Well, as the title suggests, collecting art for love, money, and more begins with collecting for love. And that can mean a number of things. People get into collecting art for any number of reasons. There's the social scene, there's the chance to make a lot of money, there's a opportunity to make a statement about themselves, and then there is the pure passion of responding to works of art. And I suppose in the title, that's what love means more than anything else. It's really the human response to beautiful things, using the word beautiful in the broadest connotation. So
I would just add that there are people that come to the art world just because they need to decorate their homes. And what happens in that process is that they begin to fall in love with those things that they are putting on the walls. And it's almost an accident, because it starts out to be, I need something green that looks right with the sofa, and then suddenly green becomes a forest and it's beautiful. And I think it can just happen quite by accident.
And then the love at the at the extreme is a kind of a almost collecting. Speak with collectors, and very often they talk about it's almost a sickness. It's a compulsion. It's one artist, Larry Clark, describes drug addiction, and once the needle goes in, it stays in forever. It never comes out. For many collectors, that's what the collecting activity is. It's really a deeply passionate, almost compulsive activity to want to own objects that mean something to you emotionally, intellectually, works of art that really engender a response in the viewer.
I think that's absolutely true. Certainly, I would admit to being a total addict, and I would also admit to my husband being a total addict.
In her case, it's an art addict.
I'm an art addict, yes, by the way, not drugs. I think we find as people begin, there's a sense of discovery, there's a sense of enlightenment, there's a sense of pride, there's a sense of realizing that other people are taking notice, and there's also this sense of I'm learning. If I go here, I'm going to even learn more. I'm going to get an even better work of art. I'm going to be even smarter. I'm going to be even more distinguished. And it truly is an exciting, totally compelling activity. And the excitement never wanes. In fact, it tends to build on itself. The more, the better. Love is something very easily available to anyone who is looking at art and engaged with it. And in fact, this very afternoon, we were at a gallery looking at an artist that both Ethan and I know quite well. And I watched Ethan as he looked at this exhibition, and for a time he hasn't been quite convinced, and I looked at his face and I saw this kind of happy,
She knows me too well.
real, totally dedicated to the experience of seeing this painting. It was extraordinary, and I knew at that very moment he had fallen in love. And he's very lucky that it's art that he's in love with, because I would know it no matter what it was in love with.
That's an interesting, the question of where love resonates is an interesting one, because it's somewhere between the brain and the stomach and heart. It's some combination of those things, and it wouldn't be art if it wasn't indescribable, that response, and unique. So those you can respond to a work of art because you understand the intentionality of the artist, and it triggers something in your mind, and you're just amazed by human creativity that way. And then that somehow translates into a more emotional feeling. Other times you can look at something and just swoon in front of it, and later become engaged with the thought process of its maker. So it hovers in those areas, and it's fascinating to experience.
I would add that sometimes it's just a knowledge or a sense, as Ethan said, somewhere between the heart, the stomach, and the mind, that you may want to pay attention. It kind of stops you, and you think, I'll stay here for a moment or two. And that begins the affair.
You know, when I first started looking at art, seriously looking at art, I was doing some consulting work in Washington, D.C., and it was very difficult, endless days in a room without windows, and I couldn't get out of there soon enough at the end of the day, and I used to rush over to the National Gallery in Washington just to free my head from the challenges of a workday. And in the National Gallery, there are a number of rooms that were result from the gift of Chester Dale, and they're Impressionist paintings. And I used to go into those rooms, and I couldn't focus on one painting. They were all so amazing to my eyes that I would spin through the rooms. I mean, I couldn't stop looking. And I think that happens to a lot of art collectors. Not just when they're beginning to look at art, but they can come into an exhibition, and the combination of joy, excitement, stimulation is quite palpable.
When you're in a domestic situation that's conflicted, there is nothing more that you can describe except that you're very uncomfortable. The one thing that I think happens more often than not is that experience either makes the couple stop, they just don't do it anymore, or one takes the lead. And once one takes the lead, the other tends to be, well, if he likes it, it's fine. Or if she likes it, it's fine. Somehow that works out. I used to think that when I started, I needed to be a bit of a marriage counselor, and I've learned that less is more.
Started out consulting,
yes. Not being a marriage counselor.
For us as a couple, it's very, very unusual. I mean, we marvel at it all the time. We can walk into an exhibition at a museum where there's nothing to buy, and it can be a Picasso exhibition or a Warhol exhibition, you name it, and we can walk out of a room and play a game that a lot of couple collectors do, and that is, if you could have any one of those paintings, which would you take? And invariably, the two of us select the same painting.
That's true.
Or go out of the room and say, I wouldn't have any of them. And so collecting for us as a couple is not only easy, but it's extremely stimulating, because I think we both think enough of each other's curiosity that if I don't respond as quickly as Thea does, or vice versa, the other of us will look at that work in a different way. We'll say, if Thea's interested in this, I'm going to look again. And so the net result is, almost always we agree, not only on the artist, discovering a new artist, but on particular works of art.
Does the art need to speak to an individual, and does that individual hear that voice? I think that the me that you're talking about is a collector's ultimate disposition, ultimate frame of mind, ultimate idea of what it is that they're trying to do as they're going forward in collecting. So in that sense, yes, the work will speak to that frame of mind, to that disposition, to that point of passion. And that's a pretty palpable feeling that you get when you hear that voice.
There's the flip side to what Thea was just saying, is that for most collectors, when you're buying art, inside of your self, you feel you're making some kind of statement. at its most basic level, this is what I like. It's an assertion of taste. There's no question in my mind that that's a primary motivator for people who are lucky enough to have the wherewithal to collect, lucky enough to be interested in visual expressions. They're saying, I think this is good. I believe in that artist. Not only that, they're saying, of the panoply of choices that are available from this artist, this is the one that I think is the best. That runs through collecting.
When you fall out of love, the great convenience of the learning process in the art world is that there's that potential is there all the time. And the convenience is that one can trade out, begin to develop a different strain in the collecting, or simply realize that a painting doesn't do it for you anymore, or a sculpture is intrusive when it was once embracing. And that's part of the process. You don't learn without knowing that you've made mistakes. And if not mistakes in the sense of something quantifiable, mistakes in the sense of where your eye is and where your heart is beating.
You know, many years ago, Thea and I were in a discussion because she's had this consulting firm for a long time, for over 30 years. And I've always been very impressed by her willingness to say to a client that of the artist you're looking at, here are the reasons why you should go to this particular artist, consider this particular work, not demanding it, but suggesting and guiding and helping the collector along. The point she's always made is to really collect, you've got to at some point start to buy things. It creates, or causes rather, a different engagement with the work. You just look a little harder, you think a little bit more, you try to be available to your own emotions a little bit more because you have a financial stake in it. And that's part of collecting. And then just to pick up on what Thea was saying, though she said it perfectly, every collector finds that earlier acquisitions sometimes don't hold up over the years, sometimes later acquisitions. And collectors call this trading up or making their collection better or whatever terminology suits them. But it's very common to occur. There are all kinds of moments when you buy art 5 years later, 2 years later, maybe a month later sometimes. That artwork doesn't do it. I think you do change as a person over the years naturally, and collecting does trigger change because you learn more and you're engaged in different ways. It may be much more intense the 5th year of your collecting than the 1st year of your collecting. So yeah, you do evolve, taste evolves, and by taste I'm describing something that has many components.
But the question that you don't any longer like it because the style has changed or your taste is changed, that's rather unlikely. By the time people start collecting, they're fairly engaged, and the mistakes that they make will be more about just an uninformed eye. So the smarter you get, the more exposed you get, the more varied your experiences are in looking, the more likely it is that you're going to see things in a more enlightened, more informed way, and you will then trade up or trade out.
Yeah, but you know, I'm just thinking as you're talking, I think that I think for people who really get into collecting, those mistakes are almost welcome. They're part of the learning process. They say something to you about, well, you looked at this the wrong way, and there is more to be had out there. And you know, I enjoy that when something doesn't hold. You don't.
Oh, heavens no. If I think of what I bought when I first started collecting in my early 20s, I'm I'd have to blush or hide it. I think it's wonderful that I held my nose and went to the edge and jumped, but I also realized that the pool was a bit muddy.